Good evening, I'm David Kramer with Alaska Weather. As always, please visit our website, weather.gov/Alaska. You can update to the forecast through that means or check out any watches, warnings, or advisories that we might have out for your area. Also call our weather info line, 1-800-472-0391. Get any updates to the forecast through that means as well. And you can email me at the address at the bottom of the screen, david.kramer@noaa.gov. Starting off, we will take a look at some of the advisories. We do have these images of the advisories made for us by the Juneau Forecast Office. This one is in the southern portions of the Panhandle for the Hyder area. This is a winter weather advisory for snow. As you can see on the image, the Hyder area could see up to 9 to 12 inches of snow through 9 a.m. on Friday. However, there is some chance that some of those areas, especially as we get closer towards the water, could mix with rain. And then this is again for the Misty Fjords area, including Hyder. That could result in some difficult travel conditions. Up farther to the north in the Haines area, we have another winter weather advisory out for snow. We're going to see accumulations of 3 to 9 inches in Haines. However, as we get closer towards Skagway and White Pass, and also up by Chilkat River Bridge, we could see more likely 4 to 6 inches of snow on the Haines and Haines Highway. Again, 3 to 9 inches for the Haines Airport through 9 a.m. on Friday. Taking a look at the northern portions of the state, we'll start off first in the southeastern part of the interior. From Delta Junction through 40 Mile Country, we have winter weather advisories out. These are also for snow. We're looking at amounts that could be as high as 4 to 7 inches. And this is going to go until noon on Friday for all of those locations. A little bit farther south in the eastern portions of the Alaska Range, also winter weather advisory out for snow. This could result in snow accumulations of 6 to 10 inches, and this is going to be out until 9 p.m. on Friday. Up along the Arctic coastline, those eastern locations, we do have wind chill warnings out. Could drop wind chills down to as low as 65 below. Be careful if you are in those areas, and this is going to be in effect until noon on Friday. And then finally down in the Seward Peninsula area, specifically for Buckland and Deering, we do have a winter weather or a wind chill advisory out for the area. Wind chills could drop to 40 below, and this is going to be valid until 6 a.m. on Friday. For any additional details in any of these areas or any updates to the products, please check our website, weather.gov/Alaska. Taking a look now at the satellite imagery, we'll start with the low pressure system out near the eastern portions of the Gulf of Alaska. We can see the system pushing north closer towards the Panhandle area, bringing some stronger winds, as well as that heavier precipitation that's resulting in those advisories that we were looking at a little bit earlier. As we look over mainland Alaska, some of the cloud cover associated with that low is over the southeastern portions of mainland Alaska, resulting in some snow for those locations, including those areas of the interior. Then as we move farther out to the west, we can see another system moving through the western Aleutian Islands, bringing a mix of precipitation to the islands, but primarily snow out ahead of this system. And finally up north, we can see just a little bit of cloud cover moving in by Utqiagvik, bringing in some lighter snow to the area. As we look for the weather for the remainder of the day, we can see that snow up there, kind of in the northwestern portions of the mainland. Some areas of fog farther off to the east. As we drop down into mainland Alaska, we can see the snow that's resulting from that low out over the eastern portions of the Gulf of Alaska. That snow is going to extend down from the interior down into southwest Alaska, primarily for the Bristol Bay area and Alaska Peninsula, out through the south central area as well. Primarily rain or a rain and snow mix out over the Gulf waters. But then as we get into the Panhandle area, we're going to see a lot of snow, especially in those areas down by Hyder and up by Haines. As we move out way farther to the west, we can see that other front pushing through the western Aleutian Islands, bringing that rain-snow mix to the area with snow out ahead of this system. As we move into tonight, that front is going to continue to push farther off to the east, moving into the central Aleutian Islands with some snow and mixed rain and snow showers behind it. Out ahead of it, primarily going to see snow for the eastern Aleutian Islands, but that warm front bringing in that push of warm air, starting to transition things over to a rain-snow mix. For tonight, that snow is also going to make it to the Pribilof Islands. And then out ahead of this system, we're going to see some remaining lingering snow showers out over the Alaska Peninsula, extending up towards the King Salmon area. As we look farther off to the east, in the eastern portions of the Gulf of Alaska, our low pressure remains, bringing continued precipitation to the Panhandle area, starting to be more rain as we get closer towards the Gulf water with more snow farther inland. In the southeastern portions of the mainland, we are still going to see snow throughout the night tonight, with some lighter areas of fog in the northern interior and then more fog up along the Arctic coastline. As we move into Friday, our low that was out over the eastern Gulf of Alaska is now going to push into the northwestern portions of Canada, continuing to bring flow off of the Gulf waters into areas of the Panhandle, resulting in more precipitation for the Panhandle, some rain closer towards the Gulf, and then snow for the coastal mountains and areas farther north like Lynn Canal. Out over mainland Alaska, high pressure nosing in from the northwest is starting to dry out much of the state, but still some lingering snow out over the southeastern portions of the mainland. As we drop down into the Bering Sea and Aleutians, our old front is starting to break apart as a new low has formed along the old triple point boundary where the occluded front met with the cold and warm front. And that low is now going to be by the Alaska Peninsula and eastern Aleutians, bringing a mix of rain and snow to the area with primarily snow for the Alaska Peninsula, rain and snow mix behind it. Still some colder air coming in behind this system, bringing some snow showers to the central and western Aleutians as well, and so not quite making it to Kodiak Island at this time. However, as we move into Saturday, that new low is going to push off closer to Kodiak, spreading snow into Kodiak Island, southwest Alaska, and back into the North Gulf Coast, including Prince William Sound. Warm front with this system is pushing through the Gulf of Alaska, bringing another round of warm air and moisture to the Panhandle area, resulting in some rain for southern locations, starting to mix with snow and become primarily snow as we get closer towards the Lynn Canal area. High pressure still dominating mainland Alaska, keeping most of the precipitation in the southern mainland. However, there are going to be some areas of blowing snow near the St. Lawrence Island and Bering Strait areas due to winds picking up snow already on the ground. Then we'll have our old low that's pushing towards the central Aleutian Islands, bringing snow to the Bering Sea, Pribilof Islands, and the Aleutian Islands. For our temperatures Friday morning lows in the Panhandle area, we will see mid to upper 30s for southern locations, getting colder as we get farther to the north, and mid 20s for the Lynn Canal area. Out over south central Alaska, starting off in Kodiak Island, 22 degrees for Kodiak City, near 20 to the mid-teens for much of the areas along the Gulf Coast, and then dropping down into the teens as we get to more interior locations with Kenai, down to 12 degrees. Single digits for inland locations like Talkeetna and Glenallen. As we move up into the interior portions of the state, all locations are going to drop down below zero. Most places getting quite cold, near minus 30 and minus 40 for the Bettles area, through the Brooks Range in the minus 20s to minus 30s, and then along the Arctic coastline, minus 20s everywhere. As we get farther to the east, a little bit colder into the lower minus 20s. For the Kotzebue Sound area and Norton Sound area, you're going to see minus teens for the most part. Kotzebue a little bit colder, down to minus 21, minus 13 out at Savunga. Down in southwest Alaska, below zero for the YK Delta, but right around zero for the Bristol Bay area, a little warmer there. And as we move into the Alaska Peninsula in the 20s, and the Aleutian Islands right at freezing. Pribilof Islands are going to be near 20 degrees. Friday afternoon high temperatures starting off in the Panhandle near 40 degrees for southern locations, and then in the mid-30s as we get farther to the north in Lynn Canal. Yakutat and Juneau both at 39 degrees. Along the North Gulf Coast for south central Alaska in the 20s, in the teens for interior locations, 30 degrees for Valdez. Up into the interior, staying below zero for most locations. Some areas out by 40 Mile Country going to stay just above zero, but most locations below zero into the minus teens as we get closer towards the Brooks Range, and minus teens along the Arctic coastline as well. Near minus 10 for the Kotzebue Sound area, and just below zero for the Norton Sound area and St. Lawrence Island. Down in southwest Alaska, near zero for the YK Delta, a little warmer near the water, single digits for the Bristol Bay area, and getting above freezing for most locations of the Alaska Peninsula, and then near 40 for the eastern and central Aleutian Islands, and mid-30s for the western Aleutians. 31 degrees expected for St. Paul. Saturday morning lows for the Panhandle area, dropping down to the lower to mid-30s for southern locations, and then in the 20s as we get farther to the north with Haines, getting down to 27 degrees. For south central Alaska, single digits along much of the coastline. Homer, a little bit warmer there at 10 degrees, and Kodiak, quite a bit warmer at 22 degrees. Below zero for the Cook Inlet area, extending up towards Talkeetna, and then in the negative teens for the Copper River Basin area, with minus 16 for Glenallen. Up into the interior, below zero once again for all locations for Saturday morning, dropping down into the minus 30s right in the middle of the interior, and then warmer as we spread out towards the west coast and up along the Arctic coastline. Minus 20s along the western portions of the Arctic coast, minus 30 as we get closer towards Deadhorse. In the Kotzebue Sound area, in the minus 20s, and then the minus teens for much of the Norton Sound area and St. Lawrence Island. Southwest Alaska staying near minus 10 for the YK Delta, just below zero for the Bristol Bay area, and right around 30 degrees for much of the Alaska Peninsula, as well as the Aleutian Islands. The Pribilof Islands are going to be in the lower 20s. Saturday afternoon high temperatures for the Panhandle area, getting into the lower 40s for southern locations, into the 30s for northern locations, and then along the North Gulf Coast into the 20s, with Seward getting up to 26 degrees, in the teens for the Cook Inlet area, 14 for Anchorage and for Talkeetna, and then single digits for the Copper River Basin. In the interior, staying below zero most locations, single digits in the south, getting into the teens and 20s as we get closer towards the Brooks Range and Arctic coastline, minus teens for the Kotzebue Sound area, minus single digits for the Norton Sound area, getting up to near zero for the YK Delta area, into the teens for Bristol Bay, and into the 30s for the Aleutian Islands.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
For aviation, we'll start off with a look at our flying weather on Friday morning. Front moving through the Bering Sea and Aleutian Islands is bringing some IFR conditions as it passes through, starting to move into the eastern Aleutians. Behind it, we're seeing some MBFR conditions, and out ahead of it as well, we're seeing some MBFR conditions moving into the Pribilof Islands and Alaska Peninsula. For mainland Alaska, up along the Arctic coast extending down to Kotzebue Sound, we do expect to see some MBFR conditions. And then in the eastern portions of south central Alaska, we do expect to see some IFR conditions with MBFR conditions around the area. Down in the Gulf of Alaska, we're going to start off VFR out west and then progressively deteriorate as we get to IFR conditions in the eastern Gulf and IFR conditions throughout all of the Alaska Panhandle. Friday afternoon, those IFR conditions are going to remain for the majority of the Panhandle area. However, some areas farther to the south are going to start to see some MBFR conditions. MBFR conditions are eastern portions of south central Alaska as well as southeast interior. And up along the Arctic coastline, we're going to start to see some IFR areas as well as MBFR moving into the Brooks Range. Front out over the Bering Sea and Aleutian Islands is moving into the eastern portions of the Bering as well as the Alaska Peninsula, bringing IFR conditions to the area with MBFR conditions further west. Saturday morning, primarily MBFR conditions throughout the Bering Sea and Aleutians. However, there's some isolated areas of VFR, as well as some IFR conditions extending through the Pribilof Islands and down into the Kodiak area. Much of the southern portion of the mainland should be VFR, but as we get closer towards the Brooks Range and Arctic coastline, we'll see primarily MBFR with some isolated areas of IFR. Finally, down in the Panhandle area, primarily MBFR conditions are expected Saturday morning, with some IFR conditions as we get closer towards the coastal mountains and Lynn Canal area. Saturday afternoon, IFR conditions throughout the Panhandle area, and then MBFR conditions for much of the Gulf of Alaska, extending up into the southern portions of south central Alaska. Up in the the eastern portions of the Brooks Range, we're going to see some MBFR conditions, and then throughout the Bering Sea, Aleutian Islands, Alaska Peninsula, we expect to see MBFR conditions extending out towards Kodiak Island and the Bristol Bay area. For our passes starting up north at Anaktuvuk, expecting to be MBFR throughout the day Friday, as well as at Adigan Pass. Lake Clark and Merrill should both be VFR throughout the day. Rainy Pass will start off marginal and then improve to VFR in the afternoon. Windy Pass will also start off marginal and then improve to VFR conditions. Isabel Pass, however, should stay marginal throughout the day Friday. Mentasta Pass expected to be IFR all day, and then Tanita Pass should start off marginal, improving to VFR in the afternoon. Portage should be VFR throughout the day Friday. And then Chilkoot and White both expected to be IFR all day Friday. For our surface freezing line, it moves through the central portions of the Bering Sea and down by the Alaska Peninsula, moving along the North Gulf Coast and then into the Panhandle area. We have an area of warmer air pushing up towards the eastern Aleutian Islands with the front moving through, where we have freezing levels up to as high as 6,000 feet just to the south of the eastern Aleutians. For our icing with the two systems, we do have some icing between 1,000 and 5,000 feet for the central and western Aleutian Islands, then above 2,000 feet as we get closer towards the eastern Aleutians, Pribilof Islands, and Alaska Peninsula. Out over the Panhandle area, we do expect to see some icing above 3,000 feet, then above 4,000 feet as we move to the southeastern portions of the mainland. For our jet stream, strongest portion of the jet is going to be to the south of the eastern Aleutian Islands out of a westerly direction, 120 knots. And another branch of the jet is 115 knots out of a northwesterly direction out through the Gulf area. For 9,000 feet, some of our strongest winds are going to remain out over the Gulf of Alaska. Out of a northwesterly direction, 60 knots are expected, dropping down to around 35 knots as we get close towards the Kenai Peninsula and southwest Alaska. Out over the Panhandle area, southwesterly flow up to as high as 55 knots is expected. Then out over the Aleutian Islands, primarily a west to southwest wind, up to as high as 45 to 50 knots. Up along the northwest coastline, northerly winds 30 knots expected. Down to 3,000 feet, some of our stronger winds are going to be in the northern portion of the Bering Sea up to as high as 60 knots and out by northeastern Russia up to as high as 75 knots out of an easterly direction. Out over the Aleutian Islands, a somewhat westerly flow, 40 to 45 knots, becoming southerly as we get by the Alaska Peninsula, 50 knots expected there. Out over the Gulf of Alaska, 40 knots is expected out of a west and northwest direction. Then westerly flow, 40 to 45 knots out over the Panhandle area. Much of mainland Alaska should be fairly calm at 3,000 feet until we get up along the Arctic coastline, where we will see some stronger winds, getting up to as high as 35 knots out over the eastern portions of the Arctic coast. For our turbulence throughout the Aleutian Islands with the stronger winds below 3,000 feet for the central and western areas, below 4,000 feet by the time we get to the Alaska Peninsula, below 5,000 feet for Kodiak Island and out towards the Kenai Peninsula. Finally, over the Panhandle area, we are expecting turbulence below 6,000 feet.
Howdy there, astronomators. Trace here. Astronomically speaking, the moon's phases just fly by, pun intended. And every new moon, we get this phenomenon known as the old man in the new moon's arms, or Earthshine. To see it, head out and look west at the rising, waxing crescent moon. As the week progresses, the crescent will broaden, but the darker side of the moon should be illuminated too, giving the impression of a globe hanging in the sky. This is Earthshine, and it is one of my favorite things. It happens because of Earth's albedo, the light that reflects off the planet back into space, and some falls on the darker side of the moon. The new moon happens early this week, so we should get some Earthshine, but even if you miss it, a robot is landing on Mars on the 18th, coincidentally coinciding with a Moon-Mars conjunction. So get out there and keep looking up.
We're at Vandenberg Air Force Base. We're about 20 minutes before the launch of ICESat-2. You might see the white light off in the distance. That's the Delta II rocket.
It kind of feels like an idea that was always going to just stay an idea. But no, it's real. It's sitting on top of the rocket.
You know, and for me, it's kind of surreal. Like you say, it's been 10 years, and it's hard to believe. It's like, we're really here? This is really about to happen? It's totally cool.
This is Dr. Tom Newman. Over the years, his work has taken him to some pretty remote areas to study changes in the ice regions of our planet. And his research, among many others, has defined the goals of the new NASA satellite, the Ice, Cloud, and Land Elevation Satellite 2, or ICESat-2.
And we have ignition. And
the story of ICESat-2 really begins with ICESat-1. ICESat told us all kinds of cool things about the ice sheet and about sea ice that we didn't really know to ask. That data allowed us to measure elevation change of ice sheets in a way that we hadn't been able to before, and showed that all the action on the ice sheets, the places that were really changing quickly, were around the edges. So when we were thinking about what could we do better next time, we knew that was one key component.
In addition to the edges of the ice sheets, ICESat-2 needed to measure a dimension of sea ice that remained elusive: its thickness. To figure out how thick sea ice is, you can measure the height of ice sticking out of the ocean, or freeboard, and compare it to the height of water between the sea ice flows, called leads.
The problem is, sea ice is really dynamic, and those cracks open and close various places in the ice pack throughout the day, throughout the year, and what we need to do is have measurements of the ocean whenever it's available, wherever it occurs in the sea ice pack.
To solve that problem, ICESat-2 was designed with a fast pulsing laser instrument to take precise, near-continuous measurements across its 3 pairs of beams. For 10 years, everything about the mission was designed to measure rapid changes in the most rapidly changing part of the cryosphere. But it has to get into space first.
But it's a huge transition going from the ground to in space. We've spent better part of 10 years, thousands of people have been involved, and actually seeing the rocket there on the pad with all of that work kind of all put together in one place, it's pretty amazing. And then getting up in the middle of the night to go watch the actual launch, it's sort of surreal in a way, because you've put so much time into it for so long, and actually seeing it over there is like, whoa, you know, it's a big deal.
4, 3, 2, 1, 0. That's off. That's 1.
That was awesome. Totally cool. There it went. That was Atlas. Last Delta II, heading on out.
So Atlas has been turned on over the course of the first few weeks of the mission, really culminating for us with a laser. So this is our first look at sea ice data from ICESat-2, and it looks fantastic. The signal levels look great. We've got plenty of photons there. We're capturing ridges. We can clearly see the ocean. All sorts of cool stuff in there, and this is just our first data. It's only going to get better from here on out.
The data from ICESat-2 is well on its way into digging deeper into the unknown dimensions of sea ice sheets, and glaciers. It will shed light on changes in sea level and global weather patterns, and once again find new things about ice we didn't know to ask.
So my heart is definitely racing. I don't know about anyone else's. This is the stuff nerds dream of.
Slight chance the flight may see ICESat-2 in their center windscreen. 10 seconds. 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back to the marine section of the forecast. We'll start with a look at our ice edge. Out west, I want to point out that as the strips of ice along the ice edge are melting in the warmer water, especially those areas west of St. Matthew Island, that there are still some thicker flows up to 2 to 4 feet thick near the ice edge itself. Also along the Bering Strait coastline, we do expect the westerly flow to push some of the ice away. However, the gaps left by that moving ice will be quickly filled in with new sea ice formation. Down in southeast Alaska on Friday in the inside waters, southerly winds expected. 20 knots down south in the central areas, up to 30 knots with gusts to 45 knots. And then in the Lynn Canal area, southeast winds 15 knots expected. Out over the Gulf, westerly winds 30 to 35 knots, seas up to as high as 23 feet. On Saturday in the inside waters, south to southeast winds 20 to 25 knots, seas up to as high as 6 feet. Out over the Gulf waters, easterly portions, southerly winds 30 knots expected, seas up to 19 feet. And then becoming more southerly and eventually easterly as we move farther up to the north, 20 to 25 knots. For Friday in south central area and the Gulf in the north, we have westerly winds 30 knots expected. As we move closer towards the Barren Islands, we have 40 to 45 knots out of a northwesterly direction, and storm force winds 50 knots out of the west of the Barren Islands with seas up to as high as 21 feet. In Cook Inlet area, northeast winds 15 to 25 knots with the strongest winds farther to the south. And then in Prince William Sound, northwesterly winds 35 knots expected. On Saturday out over the Gulf waters, east to northeast winds 20 to 25 knots up north and 30 to 35 knots out west. In the Cook Inlet area, 10 to 30 knots out of a northeasterly direction, picking up quite a bit with those stronger winds in southern areas of Cook Inlet, and also northeast winds 30 knots as we get west of the Barren Islands. In the Prince William Sound area, northerly winds 15 knots expected. On Friday for the Alaska Peninsula and Kodiak Island. Near Kodiak Island, westerly winds 35 knots, dropping down to 25 knots south of the island, and then by Sand Point, southeasterly winds 25 knots. On the Bering side, easterly flow 25 to 30 knots expected. On Saturday near Kodiak Island, north to northeast winds 30 to 40 knots, strongest through Shelikof Strait. And you can see our winds circulating around the low near the Prince William Sound area with on the east side 30 knots out of a southeasterly direction, northwest 30 on the southwest side of the low. And through Bristol Bay, northeast winds 30 knots and north winds 25 knots north of Cold Bay. As we move to Friday, along the Aleutian Islands, out by the eastern Aleutians, southeast winds 30 knots expected, west to southwest winds 20 to 25 knots for the central Aleutians, and then southwest winds 25 to 30 knots as we move closer towards the western Aleutians, with seas up to as high as 19 feet, highest near Attu Island. On Saturday, out by the western Aleutians, we have northwest winds 20 knots, picking up to 30 knots out of a southwesterly direction as we near Kiska. For the central Aleutians, we have south to southwest winds 15 to 20 knots on the Bering side, and then westerly flow on the Pacific side 25 to 30 knots. For the eastern Aleutian Islands, north winds 15 knots on the Bering side, 25 knots out of the west on the Pacific side. Along the west coast, mostly seeing easterly winds, except for Norton Sound, where we'll have light winds out of the north, 5 knots. Near St. Lawrence Island, we'll have easterly winds 15 knots, 25 to 30 knots near Nunavik Island, 30 knots near St. Matthew Island, and 35 knots for the Pribilofs. For Saturday, north to northeast winds for all locations along the west coast, 15 knots in Norton Sound, 20 knots from St. Lawrence Island through Nunavik Island. On the south side of Nunavik Island, up to 30 knots for St. Matthew Island as well, and 20 knots for the Pribilof Islands. Up along the Arctic coastline, westerly winds 15 to 20 knots, becoming northwest 10 to 15 as we move into the Chukchi Sea, and then 15 knots out of the east south of the Bering Strait. On Saturday, along the Arctic coastline, north to west winds 5 to 10 knots, becoming more northerly as we move down the west coast, 15 to 20 knots, and then north winds 20 knots south of the strait. Recap of our weather for tonight. We have a frontal system moving through the Bering Sea as well as the central Aleutian Islands, bringing snow to much of the Bering, Pribilof Islands, as well as the eastern and western Aleutian Islands. Mix of precipitation with some of that frontal system moving through for the central Aleutians. Out over mainland Alaska, we have some snow out for the southeastern portions of the mainland, where we do have some winter weather advisories out for Delta Junction area through 40 Mile Country, as well as the eastern Alaska range. Up along the Arctic coastline, we do have some areas of fog, but we also have wind chill advisories, or wind chill warnings rather, in effect for the eastern portions that could drop wind chills down to 65 below. For the Panhandle area, heavy precipitation is resulting in some winter weather advisories for snow for the Hyder area as well as the Haines area, and we're going to mix with rain as we get closer towards the Gulf waters. On Friday, continued precipitation for southeast Alaska as well as southeast mainland, and for the Bering Sea and Aleutian Islands. With Alaska Weather, I'm David Kramer. Thanks for being with us tonight.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.